to Watch is an intimate look into the lives of prominent and influential women leaders from around the world and the challenges they faced on their journey. It's the real story behind her title. Join us every week to hear more stories about women from around the world and in your own communities at womentowatch.net. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of Women to Watch. I'm Sue Rocco. It's so great to be back. Joining me this week will be Regina Bain, and Regina is the executive director for the Louis Armstrong Museum in Queens. As always, stay with us during the breaks where you'll hear from our exclusive watch team of corporate partners, bringing you news and information from their organizations and their industries. You can find the show on all podcast platforms, but also on our YouTube page at W2W Media. That's W2W Media. So now I'm honored to welcome to the show Regina Bain. Regina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. Listen, I wondered if you could start off by talking a little bit about the neighborhood that you grew up in southern Florida.
Yes. So I was born in Riviera Beach, Florida. My mother, Francina Bain, raised me there along with my sister. And our street was called 26th Court. And I remember our neighborhood for the gardenias, the smell of the gardenias. Our next door neighbor had an amazing gardenia bush. I remember realizing at some point that the beach was literally a 5-minute drive away, but we never went. We stayed in our little space, and we knew our neighbors. I stayed over at my neighbor's house when my mother was working. She was a single mom, and she often worked late. She worked 3 jobs. And so I remember my neighborhood for the smell in the air of the gardenias and for knowing my neighbors and realizing at some point that there was a world beyond the neighborhood.
Yeah. I know you mentioned to me about your mom working 3 jobs. That's so tough. 3 jobs, single mother. How would you say, when you think back to being that little girl and watching mom do that, how did that impact you moving forward in your own life as far as your aspirations and what kind of life you wanted to lead?
Yes. My mother was a dancer. She was not a dancer by profession, but she was a dancer. She is a dancer in her spirit. She was a basketball player when she was younger. So she was always physical. She studied phys ed. She went on to be a phys ed teacher and went on to be an elementary school principal. But she was always moving and dancing. And my family and my grandmother as well, we grew up reciting poetry. And I remember getting books where I needed to give an oratory, either in front of the family or in front of the church. And so always, even with the work, the intense work that needed to be done, there was always room for dance, for art. And my mother made a very clear effort and initiative to make sure that I experienced the arts and all the different forms that I could. And so I deeply appreciate her ability to do both of those things, work really hard and expose me to the arts.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. She was trying to keep a balance between the stress of the work, which is there, and bringing that beautiful time delving into the arts. That's really beautiful. I know that you were a band member, but you also went. I'm going to have a question for you about that because I know there's a mentor involved. But I was curious when you were first exposed to space, because you went to space camp, which sounds very cool.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That question brought up so many memories for me. At first, I thought you were going to ask about how I first got exposed to music. And the name that came up to me was Mr. Pender. Mr. Pender was a music teacher at my elementary school. And I remember learning the xylophone, what that was from him. I had amazing teachers in elementary school. And that was also where I was exposed to science and wonder, and how to express that wonderment through poetry, but also through the study of science. And at some point, I expressed an interest in space camp. I don't remember how it got on our radar, but I expressed an interest. And my mother, being who she is as a leader, figured out how to get me there. She put advertisements in the newspaper and said, my daughter wants to do this. Can you support her? She did that other job. She took out loans. She got me to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama. I was the captain of the liftoff crew. I ate my dried ice cream. I had a ball. I didn't ultimately go into science, but that experience gave me a love and appreciation for NASA, for exploration, and for both the precision and wonderment that it requires to do that work. So thank you, Mom, for Space Camp.
Right. A world beyond here, right? Mm-hmm. How old were you when you did that? Because going to Alabama from Gardenia Fields, Southern California, is a
red clay. I remember the red clay. I don't know. I think I was in middle school. Middle school during that time.
Yeah. So tell me, you mentioned a mentor. And first I wanted to ask you, how would you describe a mentor? We talk a lot about the importance of that. Mm-hmm. And there's people in our lives that give us advice. They step in and out for certain. What would you say the definition of a mentor is? And then tell me about this mentor that you had from band.
Mm-hmm. So I think a mentor is someone who cares, who sees in you something that you don't see yourself, and then shows that to you, and helps you to realize it and see the beauty in it. I think a mentor has experience and skill that you don't, and they're willing to share it. My mentors, I had many mentors through K through 12, but in high school, I was part of the Suncoast Charger Sonic Band. And our band leader was Mr. Brown, and my dance leader was his wife, Mrs. Brown, Regina Brown. We were Regina namesakes. And he believed in all of us. And he's the person who put in front of me this opportunity to go to the Tampa Broadway theater camp. And I never thought about theater before that, not in a serious way. It was something he saw in me, said, I think this might be interesting for you. And once again, my mother made it happen for me. And so I'm thankful for his seeing something in me, for their commitment to excellence and to young people, which is what I learned through the bands. Excellence, persistence, while marching outdoors in the hot Florida sun.
In the uniform.
In the uniforms. I mean, this is Black Southern marching band culture. You work hard collectively to create an experience. So I learned a great deal from that.
Yeah. Tell me, Regina, when you think about your growing up years, what stands out as a challenge for you? What was something that was difficult that perhaps you still work on today or that you overcame?
Well, it's always a challenge to just figure out who you are. And for me, I was a pretty quiet young lady. I still am a quiet young lady. And figuring out when to speak up, how to speak up. I found my voice in very specific ways growing up. But there's always this balance in me for when to sit back and listen, and when it's time to step up and speak. And in leadership, I think both are required. I know both are required. Times to sit back and listen, and times to step up and speak. And I can be pulled in one direction or the other, and overcoming whatever I need to do what needs to be done in that moment was a challenge growing up, is a challenge now, will always be a challenge. But I appreciate that challenge.
Yeah. Did theater, so you went to Yale to study theater.
Mhm.
I would imagine that environment would help anyone, particularly young women, find their voice.
Well, it was hard because I was a Black woman from the South coming north for the first time. I had never seen snow. I didn't know what a private school, didn't really understand boarding school. There were many cultural aspects to going to Yale that caught me off guard. And I truly wanted to leave in my freshman year. But
Oh.
I knew that my mother had worked exceedingly hard to get me there. And I couldn't
Hmm.
leave. I couldn't let her down. So I had to stick it out, but I wanted to drop out. And because of the cultural differences that were hitting me.
Mm.
And through theater, through an a cappella group called Shades, another way to find my voice, those are the things that helped me to stay and helped me to persist.
Did you ultimately think it was a good fit?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Some of my best friends are my college friends. I was challenged in ways that I had never been challenged before. Um, I learned so much about the way the world works, and that I didn't know before. So it was a good process for me.
So tell me, when you graduated from Yale, did you go right to New York? I know you spent years performing. Is that what a theater major does?
Yes. Well,
Or
when I graduated from undergrad, I went straight to the Yale School of Drama, and
okay.
so it was 7 years in New Haven, which was a challenge. Um, to go from this place where you're 18 and you're young to when you're 21, 22, 23, and having that transition, having those years be in that same space. But then it was time to choose. Basically, it was LA or New York. That's the way it felt to me were my choices. I chose New York because there were some of my friends were there, and I felt more kinship with the theater community in New York. So that's where I went. And New York itself is a grand challenge. I was able to get a home with some of my friends from undergrad, and that's what helped me transition to New York.
And what would you say you miss most about performing? Because what you're doing today is completely different.
Yes, I miss the emotional excavation that one has to do in order to embody a character. In order to play Juliet, Juliet as a person, as I interpret her from the text, is very different from who I am. So in order to play Juliet, and I had the opportunity to embody Juliet, I really have to dig deep into my psyche, into my emotional well, to understand her motivations. And that is, it's hard work to do that, for myself, to then show that to partners on my stage and show that to an audience. And so I miss that type of hard work. I do other type of hard work, but I miss
Right.
that type of hard work.
Yes. Listen, we're going to go into our first break. And when we come back, I want to talk about how you landed your position with the Posse Foundation.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for our watch team, where you'll hear from Christy McCaffrey. If you missed her segment last week, she's one of our new watch team contributors, and she's going to be bringing us good news on an ongoing basis. We'll be right back with Regina Bain.
Hi, this is Christy McCaffrey with Be the Good Media. I am the founder of Be the Good Media, and I am here to share with you some good news. Be the Good Media is a video production agency serving nonprofits and for-purpose organizations who are working to create a lasting and positive impact for the good. I often say that my team and I, our niche really is compassion-driven storytelling. We have over 13 years of experience crafting videos and films that help to connect an audience with the true passion and purpose behind an impact-driven mission. We also have a podcast called Be the Good Podcast. And on that show, I interview a diverse range of guests, all who are working in their own unique way to make a difference in the world. As a female founder myself, I love the opportunity to highlight good stories of anybody who's doing good work in the world, but especially the amazing work being done by females, which is why I am thrilled and honored to partner with Women to Watch Media to help elevate and shed light on the stories of women who are doing good and to share that with the masses. I recently had a really inspiring conversation with a guest of mine named Darian Johnson. Darian is a 25-year-old North Philadelphia native who shared with us that after overcoming many of life's challenges early on, she decided to dedicate her life's work to strengthening grassroots organizations and helping local families to heal, which is just such an incredible example of how we can all use our lived experiences to help support other people. You can find Be the Good podcast on your favorite podcast platform. You can also visit us at www.bethegoodmedia.com to learn more about our work. And please be sure to follow us on Instagram at bethegood_media. And remember, we can all find our own way to be the good.
We are CHOP, and we can't wait to show you around. We're the nation's first children's hospital. Now, a care network with more than 50 locations that continues to expand. 3 state-of-the-art research buildings with 1.5 million square feet of space. We have grown from 12 beds 165 years ago to nearly 600 beds and one of the best children's hospitals in the world. We have a level 1 trauma center, 11 floors of patient units, more than 20 operating rooms, first of its kind delivery unit for babies with birth defects, a separate cardiac operative and catheterization suite, and places to learn, like our internationally recognized simulation center. We have trained generations of leaders in the field of pediatrics. We are world leaders in medicine, surgery, and science. One of the top recipients in NIH funding for pediatric research. In this building, pioneers in CAR T therapy, mitochondrial disease, brain tumors, hyperinsulinism, and other rare diseases. Here, groundbreaking work in fetal surgery, genetics and genomics, and neurology. In our newest building, leaders in social determinants of health, clinical informatics and epidemiology, autism, trauma and injury prevention. Our patients come from every state and 115 countries. Meeting these challenges requires the best and the brightest. We are passionate about pediatrics. We are motivated to make a difference in the world and in our community. We are a team. We are CHOP.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined this week by Regina Bain, the Executive Director for the Louis Armstrong House Museum in Queens. And we will be talking about the museum. But I wanted to hear a little bit about your time. You were were you the CEO for the Posse Foundation?
No. So I started with Posse when it was a small organization, and I think 1 or 2 cities at that point. And I was acting. And the president of Posse came to see this performance. And then she said, hey, can you do a volunteer and do a acting class for our staff? So I did that. And she said, hey, can you work with us? And I said, I'm an actress. But my family have always been educators, and Posse is a college access and leadership organization. And I started to work there, and I grew from becoming a training specialist to a vice president at the Posse Foundation. And Posse grew from being in 2 cities to being in 10 cities, and into a $24 million organization. And I learned so much about organizational structure and growth, what it means to go into new cities, what it means to design curriculum, what it means to facilitate from a powerful group of professionals and young people. So that was a good training ground for me.
You were there a long time.
17 years.
17 years. Yes. So what was it that you felt it was time to move on to something
17
else?
years. After 17 years.
Was that the magic number?
At some point, it's time. So it was time. And I took some time to really think about what I wanted next. And in that exploration, I found in myself that I wanted arts and education together. And once I went through that process and came back out, I shared that with some of my close friends. And one of them, Dax Devlin Ross, he came back with, hey, there's this place called the Louis Armstrong Museum. Based on what you've said you are looking for, this might be for you. And so that started a journey for me, and it was for me.
Yeah. It's so interesting, isn't it? How we go through life and things just come together. So where the beginning for you was the arts and performance, and then someone saw something in you and invited you to come into the education field. Mm-hmm. And then you discovered that both could be done together.
Yes. I like straight lines, and this life is not straight. It's not straight lines. That there are many parts of me, and at different points in my life, I've been on paths that more fully embody a certain part of me, and I'm thankful to integrate those things and figure out how to fully embody who I am alongside my career and alongside my profession. It's been hard work and a learning work for me.
Mm. And how difficult was it? If I'm correct, you stepped into this role in 2020. Mm-hmm. 2020, we'll always remember the height of the pandemic.
Yes.
And here you are.
Going into the arts during the pandemic. Why not?
Unbelievable. I can't imagine the amount of stress. And walk me through that a little bit.
Well, at a certain point, when the world is that challenging, it sort of makes sense to make a big leap. You're already out of your comfort zone. Everyone is out of their comfort zone. Everyone is thinking about life and about value and about trajectory. In that moment, in some ways, it makes complete sense to go into an area that you've never been before, for me, museums, and try something new. In other ways, it's absolutely wild to go into the arts during a pandemic when everything is closed and when the economic prospect of cultural institutions is being extremely challenged. For me, I loved it. I loved all of that. I loved taking the leap because I knew what I wanted, and I knew that this was in line with what I wanted. I loved that this museum, the Louis Armstrong Museum, is a small institution, both in its physical imprint and its size of staff, but with a huge legacy. Louis Armstrong was a beginner for jazz in America, and he went to 65 countries. He was the first African American to have featured billing in a Hollywood film. He's a megastar. So that difference between the size of the institution and the size of the legacy was and is all possibility. So for me, it was perfect.
The challenge.
The challenge.
The challenge. And also I would say too, I think the fact that we were all in it together in the entire world, not just a community. There was some comfort in that, within the fear of what's
Yes.
going to be happening.
And I was very lucky. As I was transitioning, I found a community called Culture at 3. Culture at 3 was a group of cultural institutions in New York that met every day at 3:00 during the pandemic to figure out together how to survive institutionally and personally. And I started to attend those meetings, and it helped me to survive and thrive in that tumultuous time.
Yeah. How would you describe, Regina, your leadership style? So it was important for you to make everyone else around you feel okay.
Mm-hmm. So I think my leadership style is based on my mother. Her style is preparedness, excellence, clarity, and warmth. And I try to emulate that because I respect it. And so my style is to expect the best from people. They were hired for a reason. So expect the best, to set a vision and then have people move in that direction. And to get excited about what we can create together. I read something somewhere that said, being a leader is being the first person to get excited about something. I get excited about what we can create, what the programs are, what the vision can be, and being able to communicate that excitement with a clarity of vision and an expectation of excellence is my leadership style.
Can I ask you, how much did you know about Louis Armstrong before you stepped into this position?
Not very much, definitely not as much as the people who work here do. And so I had to learn a great deal. I knew of him as a pop icon, but I didn't really know the depth of the 5 decades of hits that he had across genres, from jazz to pop. I didn't know of his youth in New Orleans and what growing up there meant to him musically and personally. I didn't know about his place within conversations about American civil rights and global political and cultural movements. There's a lot that I had to learn about this whole human being. So there's a lot I didn't know. And in some ways that was good, because part of my mission is to bring in people to this legacy who don't know the legacy of Louis Armstrong. And so having that perspective, I think, has helped me to bring this to young people, to people who are not familiar with jazz, who are not familiar with Louis Armstrong, and have them find a way in.
Yeah. I think we rarely know the full story of, I'll say, famous people, notable people's lives. So it's always so fun and interesting to learn things that surprise us.
Mm-hmm.
Was there if I would ask you what surprised you about him that you learned, what comes to mind?
Well, a couple things. One, that he didn't go beyond 5th grade in school, but he was a prolific writer and was able to navigate the politics and cultures of 65 different countries that he toured to play. He went to Germany when the wall was up. He went to the Congo when there was a civil war. He was able to navigate all of that and write about it and create, and he was a technophile. He was an early adopter of technology. And at that time, the technology was audio recordings, and he used his reel-to-reel tapes to record. And part of his background is incarceration, that he shot a gun when he was a young person in New Orleans, and he was put into a youth incarceration space. And that had an arts education program that helped to launch his career. Those aspects of not graduating fifth grade, being incarcerated when I was a young person, and then being able to be such a prolific writer and navigating cultural spaces, that I was surprised about, and I'm still digging into.
Yeah. So our viewers and listeners understand the museum itself is actually in the house that he lived in.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he grew up in New Orleans, but he and his wife, Lucille, lived for 30 years in Corona, Queens on 107th Street. And the reason why he came here is that Lucille lived in Corona for when she was young. And she is the person who did not want to live on the road because Louis would travel so much with his touring. And Louis was not excited to have a house. So she bought the house with her own money. She was a cabaret dancer. And she is the reason why we have this home. The historic home is now a landmark space. No one has lived in the home since the Armstrongs. So all of the furnishings, the wallpaper, the paintings are their own. And we do guided tours through that house, through that sacred space. And now across the street, we have the new Armstrong Center. And so this is a new space that houses a jazz club, that houses a multimedia exhibit curated by Jason Moran, and houses the archives, the 60,000 piece archives, the largest of any jazz musician. So it's just exponentially expanded the type of programming we can do. But all of that is faced toward the crown jewel, which is our historic home.
Yeah, I love that. I love that kind of history, to actually be able to stand in a space, that is still the way it was. I'm going to have to get there, actually.
Yes.
I want to share a quote. You said, who I am is much more important than what I do.
Yes.
How would you describe your values and who you are?
So my values are rooted in the people that I come from. My values are rooted in what I have been taught. My values are rooted in seeking beauty, aesthetic beauty, the beauty of truth, the beauty of who people can be, even in the face of adversity and in hard times. And my values are in joy, that their art brings a tackling of complex emotions and concepts and ideas. And for me, it also brings joy. And those are my values that I'm grounded in. And I want to always be grounded in that, no matter what type of work I do. But what type of work I do is informed by my values.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And I think music is incredibly powerful in its ability to move someone. Mm-hmm. It no matter the emotion they're in. I can think about times where I may be feeling sad, and you turn music on and it takes you completely to a different place.
I was, so in our concert space, there was a concert with Dudozo Makatini. And it's a trio, piano, drums, bass. And I remember being in that space, and there was a moment when Dudozo seemed to throw the energy towards the drummer. I felt like I could literally see the energy being thrown towards this other musician. And for me, it was a demonstration of how music can literally move molecules in a space, in a person's body, and disrupt whatever was there for good or bad, often for good. And so for me, music, art more broadly has the power to do that.
Yes. My last question, I'd love to know what you do when you're not working.
I work a lot.
Are you taking any time off? Are you giving yourself a break?
I visit family,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And I try to travel. Thankfully, I've been able to travel to, in my work, to Germany, to Bahrain. I'm about to travel to Ghana as we start to put together an exhibit there about Louis Armstrong's travels there. So I think about places to explore. And sometimes I get to explore in different spaces throughout the US too. And when I can't go in person, I do try and explore by reading. I read less than I used to when I was little. I was a ravenous reader when I was little. But whenever I can travel imaginatively to another place, I also try to do that.
Yeah. Well, you have a very cool job. I'm sure there's days that, don't go as well, especially with the new center across the street. There's a lot more to manage. But I very much enjoyed our conversation, and I thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to go into our last break, and I will be back to close out the show.
We are CHOP, and we can't wait to show you around. We're the nation's first children's hospital. Now, a care network with more than 50 locations that continues to expand. 3 state-of-the-art research buildings with 1.5 million square feet of space. We have grown from 12 beds 165 years ago to nearly 600 beds and one of the best children's hospitals in the world. We have a level 1 trauma center, 11 floors of patient units, more than 20 operating rooms, first of its kind delivery unit for babies with birth defects, a separate cardiac operative and catheterization suite, and places to learn, like our internationally recognized simulation center. We have trained generations of leaders in the field of pediatrics. We are world leaders in medicine, surgery, and science. One of the top recipients in NIH funding for pediatric research. In this building, pioneers in CAR T therapy, mitochondrial disease, brain tumors, hyperinsulinism, and other rare diseases. Here, groundbreaking work in fetal surgery, genetics and genomics, and neurology. In our newest building, leaders in social determinants of health, clinical informatics and epidemiology, autism, trauma and injury prevention. Our patients come from every state and 115 countries. Meeting these challenges requires the best and the brightest. We are passionate about pediatrics. We are motivated to make a difference in the world and in our community. We are a team. We are CHOP.
That's it, everyone, for another week of Women to Watch. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Regina Bain. Just so you know, you can go to Louis Armstrong Museum.org and reserve tickets to go see the museum or attend concerts at their brand new center across the street. Thanks, as always, to our sponsors and our watch team of corporate partners, and I hope you have a great week.